Between 1992 and 1995, the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina displaced over 2 million people, half of the country's population. Entire families were forced to flee their homes, carrying nothing but what they could hold in their hands. More than 100,000 people lost their lives. Over 1,600 of them were children. This is not a story based on war. It is a story born in it. What you're about to hear is not fiction. This is a 100% true story. The voice of a child who lived through it. A boy whose childhood ended not with time, but with the sound of the first explosion. This is his memory, told quietly, under the sound of rain, so the world may remember. I didn't know then that one day I would be able to recognize explosions by sound. Grenade, sniper, RPG. I was 12, a 7th grader in elementary school, and I was happy. School had stopped. No more early mornings, no tests, no homework. Days passed without returning to the classroom. For me, a child, it meant freedom. For my parents, it meant fear. Images flashed on the television, but I didn't understand them. Barricades, people with armbands, trucks parked across roads. The Holiday Inn, a place I knew, now on the screen because of protests. People gathered, waving signs, shouting something, and then Mom suddenly turned up the volume. Dad stood up from his armchair and walked to the window, as if he might hear something from outside. And then, gunfire. "Who's shooting at the people?" I heard Mom ask, more to herself than to us. I just stood there. I didn't know I had just heard the first shot of what would become my entire childhood. That day, the world tilted, but I didn't feel it right away. For me, it was still just a day off school. More time to draw, to play in the yard, to collect trading cards. But in my parents' eyes, there was something else. Fear, as if they already knew what I didn't, that it wouldn't end by the weekend, or in a month, that it would last for years, that we'd learn to run when we heard a whistle, that we'd eat whenever there was food, because maybe there wouldn't be tomorrow, that we'd hear the sound of a bullet hitting a wall before we ever learned the sound of a kiss. And me, I was just happy there was no school. I didn't know that with that day. My childhood had ended. That evening, after dark had fallen, a man came to our house. Someone I had never seen before. He didn't knock. He just appeared at the door, as if the night itself had spit him out from its darkest corner. He carried an automatic rifle, black, long, looking heavier than the man himself. But he held it like it was part of him, like an extension of his body. My father didn't say, "Good evening." He just whispered to my mother, "Close the curtains." That was the sign. This wasn't a game. No talking. No questions. Just do as you're told. My mother gently pushed me toward the other room. I didn't resist. She closed the door, but I couldn't help myself. I dropped to my knees and peered through the keyhole. My heart was pounding like a hammer in a metal drum. The stranger sat down. My father sat across from him. I couldn't hear their words, just their tones. Hard, uneasy. Suddenly my father stood up, leaned forward and shook his head. Something didn't sit right with him. The stranger stood too. He raised his voice. His voice was rough, fractured, like someone more used to explosions than to conversation. In that moment, watching through that tiny slit, I felt fear for the first time. Not nerves, not shyness. Real, raw fear. The kind that tightens your gut and leaves the taste of iron in your mouth. Then they both stepped outside. The door closed behind them. The house was silent, and the walls, they held the echo of whatever wasn't said. When they returned, my father was carrying something wrapped in a gray cloth. He didn't speak. He placed it on the floor, gently, as if it were sacred or cursed. He knelt. His hands trembled. Carefully, he began to unwrap the cloth. First came the smell. Strange, metallic, oily, like memories fried in old grease. Then I saw it. A rifle. A real one. It lay in front of my father like an object from another world. The world of adults. A world where "we'll do it tomorrow" no longer exists. My father stared at it without saying a word, as if he recognized it, or remembered something. Maybe both. My mother stood above him, silent like a shadow. "I have to take it apart," he said. "Clean it." I didn't know what needed cleaning. Blood? The past? Or was he simply getting it ready for what was coming? That night, I didn't sleep. That night, I realized nothing would ever be the same. I don't remember the dream, just the silence before the noise. And then, a sound. Not a bell, not a voice. Something loud, raw, like the sky itself had split open. Explosions, one, then another. Like in a movie, only real, louder. I jumped out of bed, my heart racing. I heard my mother screaming from the other room, "Get to the basement now!" My sister and I were crying. We couldn't move. Our legs frozen, our bodies locked. We knew we had to go outside, down the stairs, across the upper floor, out to the basement, but we couldn't move. Then it hit. A grenade. Somewhere close. The sound was like something had been crushed, like the whole world folded in on itself. The house creaked. Dirt slammed onto the roof. Everything shook. Earth. On the roof. like the whole hillside had collapsed onto our house. We screamed, me, my sister, my mother, all at once, one single voice, and then again. Now! I don't remember running. I just remember that somehow we were outside, barefoot, in pajamas, down the stairs, cold concrete under our feet. We ran into the basement. My mother shut the door behind us like she was trying to keep the whole war out. In the corner, under an old blanket, we sat curled up. My sister held my hand tightly, like she'd disappear if she let go. And there we waited, in the dark, and in the silence, the kind that lies because it never lasts long. After a day spent in fear, hidden in a basement with no windows, surrounded by the heavy smell of damp air and old sacks, the first night slowly approached. At some point, my father returned and quietly told my mother that our neighbor Mara had been killed, the first casualty in our village. My mother cried. I didn't know if it was from fear for us or sorrow for Mara. Maybe both. The shelling had subsided. The first shadows of night were settling over the rooftops. Mom told us to dress warmly. We were going to spend the night at the neighbor's house because it was safer than ours. We got ready and stepped outside, waiting in front of the house for her. My father had already gone, joining the other men from the village to stand guard near the outskirts. In the distance, explosions still echoed. Tracer rounds lit up the sky, crossing paths like fireworks. We watched it like a movie, only this one had no ending. Then Mom came out and said only one word. Run. The neighbor's house was maybe 300 meters away, and those 300 meters felt like the longest we had ever walked. We ran breathlessly. There was no electricity. The grenade shrapnel had likely torn through the power lines. It was completely dark, and explosions echoed in the distance. An old neighbor met us at the door. He whispered for us to stay quiet and not be afraid. He gently stroked my head and my sister's. The old, heavy wooden door creaked as it opened, and we stepped inside. In the basement, there were already other women and children. Some were sobbing quietly, while small kids, 5 to 7 years old, skipped around playfully under the dim glow of candlelight. The women whispered to each other with worried looks, and it filled me with a rising sense of panic. In one dark corner, a few of them softly recited prayers. Then, more grenades, gunfire, and the bursts of heavy machine guns. I was scared. I pressed myself against my mother on one side, my sister on the other. She covered our ears with her hands so we wouldn't hear, and whispered, "Try to sleep. Everything will be all right." Morning came. We stepped out of the basement into the soft light of a spring sunrise. The village was quiet, just a few birds chirping and roosters crowing in the distance, as if nothing bad had ever happened. Everything felt calm, almost unreal. At the door, my friend appeared, the one I hadn't seen in the basement. "Where'd you come from?" "Where'd you come from?" We asked at the same time and laughed. Honest, boyish laughter. We started retelling the night before. The gunfire, the shaking. We lied to each other, said we weren't scared. In truth, we had barely managed not to soil our pants. "I brought cards," he said. "Want to play rummy?" I asked my mother. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. We sat down at the table under the old apple tree, right next to the house. The scent of blossoms filled the air, and the spring sun warmed our faces. In that moment we forgot everything. We laughed, made noise, played like only children can. And then, suddenly, a whooshing sound, like wind but heavier, deeper. At the same moment, a burst of machine gun fire tore through the air. We jumped, screamed, and ran back toward the basement where we'd spent the night. My heart was pounding. My mother met me at the door, grabbed my shoulders and asked, "Are you all right? Did anything happen?" Later we heard the enemy must have seen us sitting outside, maybe through binoculars, and opened fire in our direction. Not to hit us, to scare us, and they succeeded. After a second-long, sleepless night, a rainy morning finally broke. The sound of thunder mixed with the distant thuds of grenades. In the neighboring village, thick black smoke rose from several houses. They were burning. Whether they were hit by shelling or the enemy army had entered, I didn't know. My mother rushed through the house, grabbing our clothes and stuffing them into bags in a panic. That feeling is hard to describe. Confusion, fear, urgency. I didn't know what was really happening. My sister and I helped her, putting our things into the suitcases she had thrown onto the floor. My father burst into the house like a storm. He didn't have the rifle he'd received a few nights earlier. "Are you ready? We don't have much time," he said quickly. We ran out of the house, each of us carrying 2 suitcases in our hands and a backpack on our backs. My sister and I wore raincoats, while our parents only had regular jackets with hoods. Then my father went to the barn and led out our cow, Shara. We used to call her that affectionately. I looked at him, confused. I didn't understand why he was bringing the cow. At that moment, everything felt unclear, and Shara in that scene just added to the confusion. Then I noticed other neighbors and relatives getting ready. Some, like my father, were bringing cows with them. One man said, "As long as we have milk, we won't go hungry." I didn't understand that then. Today I know he was right. In the distance, gunfire echoed and grenades rumbled. We walked through wet meadows. Mud clung to our boots. The rain kept falling, and lines of people were already forming over the hills. I heard my father say to my mother, "We have to go through other villages to reach our territory. We'll be walking all day. There's only one route still open. Our army is holding it. That's where we need to go. We walked in heavy boots, heads down, following our mother and father. They couldn't hold our hands. None of us had free hands. Every hand carried something. Bags, suitcases, belongings that grew heavier with every passing minute. We didn't cry, neither I nor my sister. We didn't talk. We just walked in silence. Every now and then, my mother would glance back at us and ask quietly, "Can you keep going, my children?" Often she would sigh and murmur, "Dear God, what has come upon us?" Or whisper, "My sweet souls, are you tired?" We answered simply, "We're fine, Mama, we're okay," even though our legs had already begun to swell from the long, uninterrupted walk, and our arms were nearly numb from the weight. 5 hours had passed since we left the house, a house that had long since vanished from view. All we had eaten was a piece of sandwich that our mother had prepared earlier, and a small tin of raw milk from our cow, Shara. Night began to fall, and we still hadn't reached our destination. We entered a forest, just beginning to bloom. Though the rain had stopped, the ground remained wet, and the dry leaves scattered over the path were slippery and uncertain. My father, a mountain of a man, noticed I was falling behind, dragging my feet. "Can you keep going, my boy? You look tired," he asked gently. "I can," I murmured, though my knees were barely holding me. "Just a little more." "We're almost there," he said. "I'm scared, Dad. This forest is too dark. What if someone's out there, waiting for us?" "Don't be afraid, son. There's no one here." And truly, all we could hear were heavy footsteps, hushed whispers, and the occasional lowing of a cow. Still, it was eerie, dark. I couldn't even see my own feet. Then, suddenly, we emerged from the dense forest onto an open meadow. Down the hill, like scattered stars, the lights of the village we were heading toward. It felt like strength returned to my legs when my mother said, "Thank God, we've made it." We arrived at the village late at night. People were already outside waiting for us, men and women offering help. Someone held sliced bread. Someone else had milk, tea, meat, vegetables, fruit. They knew we were coming. They knew we'd be exhausted after 12 hours of walking through rain and mud. We dropped our bags and collapsed onto the wet ground. I felt like I couldn't take another step. We took the food they offered and ate in silence. Too tired to even eat properly. My father stood speaking with a man named Asim. He told him he could take us in until we found something more permanent. We picked up our bags and followed him. "Is it far?" I asked. Everyone laughed. And it was funny, considering how many kilometers I had already walked. A few minutes later, we arrived at the house. At the doorway stood his wife, Meliha, with their 2 children, a boy named Admir and his sister Alma. They were about our age. They ran toward us and offered to help carry our things. "What's your name?" the boy asked. "Demir," I answered. "I'm Admir," he said with a smile. They opened a small cottage for us, a one-room outbuilding. "We know it's small. Hopefully we'll find something better for you," said Meliha. "As long as we're alive and safe," my mother replied, her voice trembling with tears. They brought us 2 wool-filled mattresses and heavy wool blankets. We bathed in their house since the little cottage didn't have a bathroom. Inside there was only a couch, a small sink, and a wood-burning stove. My parents lay down on the couch, my sister and I on the mattresses. I lay in the dark, trying to understand what was happening. My mother sobbed quietly. My father whispered to comfort her, but I heard nothing more. I don't remember what happened after that. I fell asleep, slowly,